Welcome back. We're on our second or third lesson about data visualization and interpreting some common plots that you're likely to see throughout the data science prep course in this probability and statistics module, as well as sort of out there as a data scientist or statistician. In this lesson, we're talking about pie charts, and it's going to be pretty quick. We just want to know how to understand and know how and when to use a pie chart, right? As you are likely familiar, a pie chart's a circular statistical chart divided into slices, much like you would a typical pie. We've got an example of a really simple pie chart here. And this is actually a relatively decent use of the pie chart. I think it's in general amongst a lot of statisticians or data scientists gone sort of out of fashion to use pie charts. They can be sometimes oversimplified, or when they are not used in the right context, they can be very difficult to interpret. And I think that's the biggest issue that most statisticians like to avoid, and hence they might just avoid the use of a pie chart, right? Maybe, for example, here, if we go back to our lesson about bar plots from the last video, and we're looking about number of cylinders, right? This is very much the same type of data that could be expressed in a pie chart. I have 32 cars, each of which having a different number of cylinders, or maybe not different, but a number of cylinders, and I've grouped them together, right? How many of those have 4 cylinders? How many of those have 6 cylinders? How many of those have 8 cylinders? I could put this in a pie chart, and it would be a reasonably good way of displaying this data, right? But you'll typically see people sort of opt for the bar chart in place of the pie chart because the pie chart has sort of gone out of fashion, right? Some reasons why the bar chart is not great. First of all, I think what a lot of people do is they'll try and make a pie chart and there will be too many different subgroups, right? And I talked about, like if we just look for some pie charts, maybe on the old Google machine, right? If I look at this pie chart, this is not... I don't know there's no legend here, so it's not particularly helpful, right? But I'll look at one that does have a legend. And we can see that this is probably not a very useful application of the pie chart, right? If I look at this pie chart over here, right, I can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wedges. I can see in general which wedges are larger than others, but it's really pretty difficult for me to be able to identify which slice represents what. Like I have this blue slice. Is that January? Is that July? Is that May? I can see that that's pretty clearly January here, but it actually takes me a moment as opposed to just knowing it off the top of my head, right? If maybe there were only a red, an orange, and a gray, right? If I didn't have any of this April, May, June, July, I just had January, February, and March. I have these 3 groups. It's going to be really easy for me to see, oh, January was the smallest, that's blue. February was the largest, that's orange. March was somewhere in between the two, that's gray. But when you're dealing with 7 subgroups here, and if we extrapolated this and maybe had an entire calendar's worth, there were 12 subsections, it's not particularly useful to me. It's not easy to interpret. It actually takes me time instead of just glancing at it. So if we go back to our example, this is a better implementation of a pie chart. It's more accurately labeled, but there's still some shortcomings. Again, this is just made up data that I did when I made this plot, but I purposely made the action and the comedy preferences for favorite movie genres. These are very similar values, but they're actually not quite the same, right? And from looking at this plot, there's no way for me to really reasonably be able to get that information. Whereas if it were in a bar chart, I would see pretty clearly that one of these bars is taller than the other if they are put next to each other on the chart. Also, the same sort of thing with romance and drama, although I made that difference a little bit more distinguishable. We can see that drama is more popular than romance here. The other thing is that if I maybe wanted to look at different subgroups, right? So if I had, from people from the age of 15 to 31, they like these movies at these proportions. And then again, I do 31 to 55, 55 to 75, 75 plus, right? And I start to have different subgroups, and they're having 5 pie charts next to each other. One is going to be a little busy. It's going to be hard to sort of interpret. And 2, it's going to be really challenging for me to sort of see how different is action on this pie than it is on this other pie, right? They look maybe about the same size, but you can't be for sure. It's really difficult for me to sort of be able to just glance at those and sort of see which one is different. Another thing missing from this plot that's sort of a best practice when you are going to want to use a pie chart is to have some sense of the data here, right? And that is to actually put in the data value with your annotations or your labels on your plot, right? Here we have sci-fi. I had 4 individuals who responded that sci-fi was their favorite, which constituted 20% of my total group, right? In this plot, right, we can see that sci-fi and comedy are actually the same size because we've actually listed out the percentages here. We see that again here in this other pie chart, right? And you can sort of see some variations of pie chart that are of varying qualities, right? This pretty readable. I'm not sure the legend needs to be here, but I really do think that we could fit all of this data on a single bar chart, and it would likely be a lot more easy to interpret it, or a lot more clear. So those are some of the drawbacks to a pie chart. I think when you think about what a pie chart is good for, it's just like this. It's like when you only have one group and you're only displaying one set of categorical data, right? Like which category of movie do you prefer? And there are between 3 and maybe 6, 7 at the very most different wedges that will be in the pie. And I think if you label those well, especially with frequencies or percentages, it can be a really useful plot, right? And then the last thing is that an alternative that a lot of people are using instead of a regular pie chart is a donut chart, right? And we can see this is actually just like a chart that we saw in our last Google search, but just the circle has been cut out of it. And I think in general, I've started to see these like on consumer websites, when I go in to look at my retirement account or things like that. I'm starting to see the use of these donut charts a lot more. I think they're really visually appealing, but in the end, they work to the exact same way that a pie chart does. We've just cut out the middle of that pie chart and turned it into a donut. So that's it for pie charts. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about histograms. Histograms are going to really be sort of the bread and butter of what you use as a statistician or a probabilist looking at distributions and density curves. So this will be a really important one to make sure that we know how to use and interpret a histogram. But that's it for this lesson. I look forward to seeing you over in the next.